Hi guys, this is Teacher Patty and welcome to my YouTube channel Life with Teacher Patty, and I've been meaning to share this message with you. It's been in my spirit for the past 2 weeks. It's been heavily resonating in my spirit, and the title is What if we are greater than we imagine? What if we are more gifted than we imagine? What if we are more stronger than we imagine? What if we're the greatest than we imagine? And this is coming from a point that usually as human. Now, I'm not even speaking to sons of God only, to daughters of God only. I'm just speaking in a general sense of humanity, that we sometimes shrink ourselves into, I like it what Mosaki says, into even something below than a nanochip, like something below than even the not the SD card, that thing, that memory card that you put on your phone. We a whole human shifts themselves to that smallest space because of many things that happen as we are growing and living here on earth. But I wanted us to ask this question is, what if, Patty, you are bigger than who you are now? What if you're playing small and your playing small is not serving you? Do we have those questions with ourselves? And it's critical. If you do not have that conversation or that question with yourself, then you need to ask the Lord to help you to have those conversations with yourself, because I know God did not create anyone to be average or mediocre. He made us in His perfect image, in His image that seeks to continually grow, that seeks to continually subdue, that seeks to continually be perfected in Christ and exude the excellence and the perfectness of God, if ever there is such a word, or the perfection of God rather. So I want to ask you some question, or make you reflect on some of the things. I often ask myself, do we limit ourselves because of aspects that are within, or sometimes outside our control? Do we find it easier to limit ourselves? I ask myself that question. Sometimes it's more societally accepted to limit yourself. Shame, wazama marabuphilo busoso bamotrapa and because if you're in a community of people who do not have, having becomes such an inspiration to the others, or it becomes such a curse to the others. That's where now in our African context you'll hear things about witchcraft when someone breaks out of poverty and all. And I'm not saying those things are not there. Sometimes, guys, they are there. We've seen them. That, you know what, you have more friends. You have more friends when you are poor, because people find you not a threat in their circle, and sometimes you've got more friends when you're rich because people want to benefit. So sometimes I'm asking myself is, do we limit ourselves, and what makes it comfortable? Because we must not run away from the fact that sometimes it's a comfortable state to be limited. We might not talk about it every day, but sometimes it's such a comfortable state to be limited, because then you are accepted. I'm saying this in a sense of, when you're in a community or around people who do not value education, let me just put it that way. Sometimes people are not learned because of things beyond themselves, and sometimes it's beyond themselves. But sometimes there are just people who say, you know what, this is not for me. I don't want it. And then when you are in this circle of people just say, we despise learning, we're not going to learn, we're not going to grow, it's okay for us not to have a plan. Sihlupheka sonke, sisokola sonke, samsokolo, we love each other. Do you know that at that point it is comfortable, because for the sense of belonging, limitation becomes such a comfortable space to be in. You know, sometimes you are overweight and you don't want to deal with this issue. It's not because it's beyond your control. Sometimes it's beyond your control. There are some diseases, their treatment comes with weight as the package, as the side effect. So that's why I'm very careful that you can't just judge everyone that is overweight and think they're not doing work. Some people, they're born with elephantitis. Some people, they're born with thyroid problems. So weight becomes such a struggle. But you know, there are those people who, like me, who gain weight because they are not working out. and when you're in that circle that says it's okay ukudla igwinya ekseni, it's okay ukudla ikota ekseni mina ntambama, it's okay, and we're fine with this, their limitation becomes a choice. Limitation becomes a sense of comfort. Same as being in an abusive relationship where you are not allowed to grow. There are some people who are in abusive relationships where they are not allowed to grow. Their partner doesn't want them to study. Their partner doesn't want them to get a better job, even if that job maybe means they must move out of town. Their partners, whether wife or husband, sometimes it's like that, or girlfriend or boyfriend, or their partner just wants them to give birth every year. They don't want them to work on themselves. And for the sake of, I'm here, Diamtanda, that Diamtanda becomes a limitation. You know, there is nothing wrong with patience. There's nothing wrong with patience and patience in a relationship. But when it becomes your comfort in terms of limitation, think of this: you want to do a degree, and your partner feels like you're too educated, or your partner feels like, what are you going to do with that degree? And then you're like, okay, for the sake of peace, I'm not going to study that degree. Your limitation has become comfort, okay? And sometimes I ask myself, is the limitation accepted because mediocrity is normal? You know, sometimes when we're speaking of mediocrity, that below standard treatment, that average or below standard treatment, because we're in a society in our country where, you know, some things are just accepted, even if they are not the standard. Do we accept limitations because mediocrity is accepted? When I'm speaking mediocrity, you know, sometimes we've got so much potholes when we're driving. There's so much potholes, and to a point that we've even made roads next to the pothole, and we're quiet about it. And I'm asking myself, are we accepting limitations because mediocrity is normal? It's so normal. It's so normal sometimes ukuthi uhlale emkhukhwini, and I'm not against ukuhlala emkhukhwini. I've done that. I've been there. I stayed there, and to a certain extent I enjoyed the peace and the low cost of living I had there. But I challenged myself to be like, okay, this is the beginning. This is the beginning. There's great growth ahead. You know, I see many people in this group in Limpopo where they start buying land. I think it's houses, nice houses in Limpopo. They buy land like stands. The first thing they put is a shack. The next thing there is a mansion, like a double story next to that. You see, when you're starting small with the intention to grow, that is more than awesome. But when you are saying, no, impilo yamle, it's my destiny ukuthi ngihlale in this structure, I don't have or off. It's in South Africa at some point this is understandable, but Mdagababa, I want to encourage you to see yourself out there, see yourself building something, no matter how small. My friend Sylvia always challenges me that you must grow. You must grow, Patty. From Rondaville, we need a house now. Challenge yourself to grow, because mediocrity, as much as it is normal, it should not be acceptable if you see yourself bigger than where you are right now, you know. And sometimes I ask myself the reason why we don't think we're bigger than where we are. Is it because dimming the lights in society is acceptable? You know, sometimes when you are gifted, when you are blessed, when you are bright, sometimes you become too much for people. I know Mahlab makes so much reference of this, that, you know, that sometimes people think I've got money. People think I'm stuck up, I'm not reachable. Sometimes people think that I look down on them, and it's not even that. It's not even that. And I've been friends with Mahlabu forever and ever. It's been over a decade now, and I know she's the most loving and the most reachable person, but she does not succumb to dimming her lights. She does not succumb to mediocrity. And because societally it is so accepted that you must be below average, and the moment you refuse to be below average, people get threatened. People say all sorts of interesting things about you. And whilst I'm talking about my friend Mahlako, is she will dress for a date with herself. She will dress to the nines and go to the finest restaurant, because she is just that. She's that decided and that intentional in making the best of every day in her life. And for her, mediocrity and dimming the lights, it's just not an option. So I'm asking myself, do we dim our lights then because we're going to have more friends? Surely, when you are at your bright lights, you're going to lose the friends that are dimmed, that feel like your light dims their light, but you will gain more friends that share their bright light with the world. Okay. And I ask myself, do we stop seeing ourselves that we are bigger than we think because we don't have a benchmark? And this is taking a little bit of time for me to pause and imagine and think before I blurt the word out. Is sometimes when we have a benchmark, guys, it's easier to aspire towards something. But when we don't have the benchmark of what big is, we might retreat from pursuing big, or we might even pursue it in a wrong way. And that being said, you know, sometimes, you know, you are born great, you are born with so much purpose. You know, I love children. My daughter is 7 years old, and I learned that children do not think they are limited. Like, children do not think they're limited. If you disagree with me, how many kids believe that they can be Spider-Man, they can fly off rooftops? They still don't have the sense that, listen, the force of gravity is real. They don't have that sense, children. My daughter still believes that she can do magic, and I'm like, yo, all I can teach you is prayer, and you pray there, and the Lord does miracles there. The magic part we don't believe in this family. But that's how children are. They don't know limitations. They are born without knowing limitations. Then where do we start accepting limitations? You know, when you start going to school, funny enough, when you start meeting other kids, and when you start being introduced in a system that grades you. Now, don't hear me wrong, hear me right. School is critical. School is the foundation of our lives. I'm pursuing my master's, running towards the point of completion, and I always ask God to give me victory on this degree and not to stop studying. I am a forever glorified learner. I believe in school 100%. After God, I say, people, run, get your education. Now, what I'm saying, when we introduced to a grading system, is remember at school, that's where now you will be told, okay, you are bright, brighter, not so bright. So that's when now when we grow, we get introduced to systems that grade us. Even kids don't think that they are not healthy. They don't. But when they grow, then they go to hospitals. The system is going to grade you healthy, not healthy, and there's nothing wrong with the system. Let me put it out there. There's nothing wrong with the system. It's how it's designed so that it can it can sift data, and at that level you are data. It can sift data and respond to it accordingly. It's how it's designed. Now, the issue is when now a child is born believing that they are so bright, then they go to school and the school issues a report that actually you can't read. My daughter is at that age where they are tested on reading and writing and reciting information. But now, when you don't meet that standard at school and then you're given a report, it says actually you are not that bright. It now it sets the doubt that maybe I'm not bigger than who I think I am. And now, remember, it was only your cognitive skills that were assessed. That's what we don't stretch ourselves to embrace, that when we go through reviews in different spaces in life that we occupy, sometimes and many times they're just assessing one minute part of you, not a bigger you, not the whole you. Coming to the sense of a grade 1 child that can't read, write or recite anything, and then they are told they failed or they've not met the standard. It affects the child's greatness. But when you learn the developmental milestones of children, that there is issues of autism, there is many issues of learning difficulties that children go through, and it doesn't necessarily constitute that they cannot learn. But the moment you get that negative feedback as a child and as a parent, it is so shattering. My daughter was made to fail grade 1. And I'll say this even when I go to my grave, because I know the truth and the Lord knows the truth. She was made to fail grade 1. It's a story I will talk about the other day. And I remember I had to break the news to her. News I never believed, because I know my daughter is bright. And this is not me being a mother now. This is me being a teacher. I know she's very bright. And I remember telling her that you failed. And it was a mysterious fail, because all terms she passed. And her marks were dropped. I remember I took the matter to the district, and the district intervened, and the district person who was, he said, no, but I still believe that this child should have not failed because she's very good in maths. I took her to an independent psychologist to do surveys. In fact, she was brighter than her age. So I've got evidence as a teacher now that my daughter is bright. But I remember breaking the news to her. She cried. I know how she cries. We've spent our lives together. So I know her cry of falling, but the cry I had when I told her that she failed was a cry I've never had in her life. It was a cry of a woman broken-hearted. She could not scream. She could not even believe. But my daughter is a very forgiving person. We cried together. And I remember thinking that I don't want her to ever believe that she is not bright. This is just a war that the school did, fighting me, using my daughter. In that school, I used to be there. I used to serve there. So I just knew that this was just a war against me, and they had to take it on my daughter. And I remember when she cried, I cried with her, and when I cried with her, I realized that my daughter is bright. I will not succumb to anyone saying she is not bright. But imagine if it found me not even believing that she's great, that she's big, she's awesome, she's wonderful. It would have shattered me because I would have taken that as the gospel truth. I remember when I took counseling, they said, continue to fight the system. But where I'm coming to is now she is doing well. I changed her schools. Where she is, she's doing well. She's getting distinctions. Level 6, level 7, level 6, level 7. And I remember telling them where I took her that I need to take her for remedial this, remedial that. And I remember the teacher saying, listen, what your child is going through, was so used to it. She had an issue of she would write words, but then they will start from top and they'll skew to the bottom. So she couldn't write in a straight line and finish. She would start like she didn't have a sense of lines when writing, even though what she wrote is good. She had a very big handwriting. She didn't get the tummy tail thing. That's the only thing she struggled with 2022. And I remember saying, they said I must take her in the previous school to remedial learning. And I remember the psychologist that she went to said, even a month or two with a remedial psychologist, it will be enough because it's for her to write on lines. And I remember, God bless the school she's in, I remember telling the principal that. And the principal said, no, man, we're so used. Kids, when they come from ECD, they don't know how to write in lines. We know how to deal with that. Before grade 2, she will be writing in lines. She has a neat handwriting. She writes on lines, and I asked myself if I had a moment to believe that indeed my child is not bright, my child is not gifted, I would have fell under the radar. Now, to continue with what we're having, I was saying, sometimes at work, sometimes life happens, guys. Sometimes at work, at home, at school, you get graded in something that you're like, this is not me. Even at work, when you do PMR, you're like, this is not me. This is not me. I know I'm a performer. I know I love doing what I do. I know I give my best. I know I show up and I show off. I know I'm committed. I know I'm reliable. I know I do 1, 2, 3. But you get graded, and this grading makes you so small. Like Mosaki says, even smaller than a SIM card, even smaller than a nano chip. You just disappear in existence when people grade you. And in these spaces, unfortunately, that's where we are. We are at school. We are at work. We are at church. We are playing sports. We are part of a team. You know, you give your team, you are greatest contributor in your team. But listen, when people have decided to grade you and box you to a certain non-performing box, sometimes it's true, but many times it's not true. I have been there. Where you will give it your all at work, work throughout the night and all that. But if you don't have good relations with your manager, they will find one thing you did out of the 3,000 you did. They'll find one thing you did not do, out of the 3,000 you did. It just happens, it's the spaces we're in, they make us smaller. Now, even if the space is making you smaller, you don't have to succumb to that narrative. It is not the truth. It is absolutely not the truth. Being at work, being at school, being at church, being whatever social space and corporate space and academic space you're in, you know yourself before the space even knows you. Are you aware of that? Before you could even go to school, you knew yourself. You knew that I'm very good at running. I'm very good. The fact that you don't win races, it has nothing to do with anything. You are good. Am I saying we must not take negative feedback? No, take it by all means to grow from. But if it's a feedback that is meant to shatter you, not to grow you, then you are not obligated to take that. There are people that come to your life to grow you, to correct you, to hold you in proper correction. Sister Temba, I know when she finds dishes not washed in my flat, what she will say, pet, she'll put water in the kettle and she'll be like, pet, put that laptop away, come, wash these dishes. And I'll laugh because she's doing that out of love, out of growing me. But when someone finds the audacity to go and lie about you and say things that are not true about you. You know exactly well who you are, you know what you do, but when people come to break you with the intention to break you, for example, you know that, for example, me, I can clean, I can cook, but I'm more of a person that loves reading and writing and so at any given space, at any given time, you have to tell me when you're coming over to my place so that it's hygienic. It's not at a deadly state, but it has to be at a hygienic state because some people appreciate cleanliness. So when people just go and gossip that, I've had the recent gossip about me that, her place is so dirty. And this came from someone I trusted. And I was like, Aiwo guys. You came to my place once. And the day you came to my place, it was the day my van was stolen. So really, you don't know me every day. And people who know me, they know I'm very open to being corrected. My boyfriend knows that I'm always open to being corrected and I'm open to learning. But when people go around and then they grade you, they give you their own grading, and sometimes it's very interesting because as people, we don't find it necessary to go on grading people, guys, unnecessarily on their limitations, okay? So sometimes at work you find that even in social spaces, a person grades you on how you dress. A person grades you on how you dress and they make you smaller just because you don't dress a certain way. For me, I don't want to lie, guys. Some days I dress up, some days I do not. And the dressing up days, guys, they are lower than 5%. Some, it's wearing clean clothes. For me, it's clean clothes. And my daughter is old now. She'll be like, Mama, but that doesn't look good on you. And I'm thinking, okay, then let me change it. I'm one who will subscribe to clean clothes rather than spending time in dressing up. And I know Mahlaku dresses up to the nines. It's her default state. She likes it. So sometimes you get graded societally, but by just how you dress. And I'm like, okay, people don't even have to know who you are, what you carry. And people just judge you with how you dress. Sometimes people judge you with how you speak English. The fact that you speak fluffy English, if there's anything like that, you speak fluffy English, you know a lot. People think that you are rich, you are smart. Anyway, guys, it's just knowing the language. So we get graded in many things. Now that I've broken up what makes us feel small and all that. There was a research that was done on the native people. The native people, I think it's what we used to call the Red Indians. Actually, the first nationals of America and Canada. So those people were actually the true Americans and the true Canadian citizens. But then because they were, I don't know if it's colonialism or it's just there was a takeover in those countries, then they became the minority. And I remember this research was doing the genocide on the Red Indians or the Blackfoot Indians. There was a genocide on them. And these people, before the genocide, they lived as a community. They didn't have the individualistic sense of life like we're having today. It's just like us in African setups, like in African communities. There's more living as a community than individualism. So when these people were killed, I remember in this research, they were killed because there was a takeover in the country. And so after they lost many elderly people, they lost identity because their identity was purely on them on them living as a community. Their culture was on them living as a community. So when they lost elders in terms of how the group is going to be led in a community setup, people just lost identity. Young children lost identity. Parents didn't know, is this the right way of disciplining kids? Is it not the right way? Because some of the Red Indians, they did not believe in beating the child. Actually, they believed in embracing the child when the child is misbehaving, embracing the child as a community and giving them the need for love. That was their sense of belief. They lived with nature. They celebrated nature. They said they are the gatekeepers. They are the carers of the nature. They are not the owners. So they had many sense of beliefs and their own spirituality that was going on. So when the genocide happened, they lost their identity. It was so heavily built. And the young people started to doubt themselves because no one told them how to be. The parents, no one could say you are parenting right, you're parenting wrong, because all they could do previously was to live as a community. The decision making was not in one household between a husband and a wife and a child. It was done at a communal level. And sometimes when I'm looking at what makes us not to think that we're big, what makes us not to feel that we're great, is sometimes change. Change can make us small. Can you imagine coming from, I've got a friend of mine, Sylvia, and she's from Venda, and I've learned a lot on how Venda women are raised. And she is so focused and so reserved, and it for her it's just how they are encouraged to be, is to be focused, to be driven, but not to be like us, who, like, I'm Xhosa, so I'm always, you know us. But she is such a beautiful person to sit and have conversations with, because she's so smart. But whenever I'm doing a crazy thing, she'll be like, okay, we don't do that. And I'm learning a lot about their culture, because their culture is very clear. It's very clear on what is expected in a woman. It's very clear on what is expected in a man. I know in a Venda culture, men are expected to provide. Like, there's no excuse in provision. They do that with pride. And I'm like, oh my God, this is something so beautiful. And for me, I'm like, okay, I think I will struggle a lot in that sense, because of the impact of mining in our communities. As Xhosa people, our forefathers went to serve in the mines, and they would be gone for a year or two, start sending money, not send money, because they couldn't cope with the change. Some they went to alcoholism, some they went to getting women in the cities. So our grandmothers bore the brunt because of the system. They bore the brunt to raise their kids and raise us, and they were made to be so strong, not depending on any provision. And here I took that from my grandmother to be strong in terms of provision, and to know that, okay, stand up, girlfriend, for yourself. And here's my friend, their culture is totally opposite. Their culture is men are encouraged to provide for families. And now I'm saying change can make us so small. You see, now I'm talking about what the colonialism and the apartheid did to our community as Xhosa people. I know I'm Ndilimbond from the Xhosa people. There is a bank that I will not use that name. There's a bank that was used by our forefathers to bank their money. I almost said their name, and it the social change that the political climate brought, it went from my mother's generation to us. I just know how I grew up in a community where there was no fathers. And my mother grew up in a community where there was no fathers, because they had to go and work in the cities. But change can make us to be small. Now there's an issue of urbanization. For me, I grew up in the rural areas. I had to come to the cities to access tertiary education. And it was such a change for me. Luckily, because I'm Bible and I like learning, it was a positive change. But I couldn't stop but notice the fast-paced life in the cities. It was so fast, and because I came so grounded in the faith as Umzalwane, I thank God He shielded me from being absorbed into the city life. I would have made so many mistakes. And we thank God for the university we went to. It was in the outskirts of Joburg. It was in the Vaal. So at least the influence was not as life-changing as it was meant to be. Because change can make you small. Change can make you feel so small. In a small community in Eastern Cape, you thought you were bright. You thought you knew the way of living. And you come to Joburg, it's a bigger fish pond. There's many fishes in the pond and they're bright. They're equally bright, if not even more bright. And then you feel like, okay, I'm losing my foot on this life, and you feel small. Suddenly feel small. Sometimes changing from being a student to the workplace, it makes us small. You were bright, you were getting your distinctions in the academic setup. Then no one tells you that in the corporate setup, this is how you get your distinctions. And sometimes it will be something against your values. We've heard of couch casting, people getting promotions because of couch casting, like where you have to do sexual favors to get ahead. Like you things happen now when you're in this space at work. People sleep with people to get ahead. People lie about people. People accept people steal people's ideas, and if your values are so straight, if they are based on Christ, sometimes it becomes a jungle that no one told you about, and that makes us small. When 5 years you're still an ordinary teacher, not an HOD, not a deputy principal. 10 years, you're still an ordinary teacher. 15 years, you're still an ordinary teacher, because maybe you're not willing to play dating, maybe you're not willing to engage in the jungle games. I'm just using teaching as an example. It could have been an accountant role, it could have been a lawyer role. And then it feels like, you know what, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. It feels so like, oh no, this is not for real. This is really, really not it. And no one prepared me. No one prepared me for this. And then you start feeling small. Am I not good? Am I not bright? Am I not bringing the best of myself at work every day? Now you start feeling small. You don't think that you are big. Now let's go to the Bible. You know, I would never ever share any word of encouragement without the Bible. Numbers 13, it's Moses sending out the 12 spies from each tribe of Israel. They were supposed to go and scout the land in Canaan. And they went there for 40 days, and then they brought back the report. And the 11 spies were so negative. And remember, these are the people, and many times when we're sharing about this word as pastors, as ministers of the word, we forget to bring the context of how small these people were feeling when they left Egypt. They were not in Egypt for a day. They were in Egypt for years. And Egypt was the system of slavery. It was there to break every ounce of mental capacity within an Israelite. It was there. It made it a point that it breaks them to no decimal point that they feel powerless as people and powerless as a people, the collective. And these people, they saw God delivering them. But the Bible doesn't say they went through therapy. Show me the verse where it says in the Bible, after they came out of Egypt, they went through therapy. No, they did not go through therapy. So even though they left Egypt, Egypt was still in their mind. If you've been in a traumatic relationship, at home, at work, in your personal life, with your child, just because you walk out of that situation, it doesn't mean the trauma left you. It will leave you the moment you start dealing with it. And when you start dealing with it, it's when you ask the Holy Spirit, number one, to heal you. And number two, it's when you go for therapy with a psychologist. Then that trauma slowly but surely leaves you. So when Israel came out of Egypt, they did not go to any counseling. They did not go to any counseling. It was Egypt, then Canaan. So they still had the trauma of being abused by people bigger than you and people in their land. So you're taking these leaders, and some remember there was even a new generation that was born in Egypt, a generation that did not, remember we're talking about the identity that the Native Americans suffered from. Now, there was a generation born in Egypt that had no identity with Jehovah Yahweh. It did not even understand that there was someone called Jehovah Yahweh as higher power. They were born in Egypt. It was the pharaohs that were ruling in Egypt. It was the system that was the system of worship, of idolatry worship in Egypt that they grew up under. So if you're telling them about God, it's like, huh? If you're telling them about the identity they should be having, but the identity that their parents could not live in Egypt, you are asking too much from this generation. Now, these people that were taken, their leaders, they're still traumatized with how they were treated as people. No one takes them for counseling. Even with us, when it came from apartheid, no one took our parents, our grandparents. At least me, when apartheid ended, I was Fefe's age. I think I was 8 years or 7 years. I remember, and I was in the rural area. So for me, I didn't even know the impact of it. Unlike a person who was in a city who experienced it through and through, and I remember when things changed, no one had a therapy session with my grandmother. I remember my grandmother was so traumatized because she's got so much land. She was so traumatized that people were going to take land because now she's a widow. She was like, this government is going to take land from me and all that. No one told her that it's okay. No one is going to take anything away from you. There was no counseling for the Israelites who came from Egypt. Now, Moses is taking them in the instruction of the Lord, which is a good instruction, which is a fair instruction that we believe in. The Lord is right all the time. Takes these people, but now they've not been healed from the traumas of the past. They're seeing, now imagine for 40 days, you've lived in Egypt for years under abuse. And now someone saying, this is your land, and you're thinking, oh my God, we still need to fight for this? We still need to fight. Are we not going to walk in and get this thing and live peacefully ever? We still have to fight? There's still scary people here? Oh my Lord. And they're mentally tired. These are not people who go to church to pray. They were not allowed to pray in Egypt. They don't even have a time to go and debrief and pour out their hearts to God and say, Lord, we're scared. Just feeling like we have to do this again? We have to fight a person again? No, we're not doing that. Have you ever fought in your life to a point where you feel like, I can't? I don't want to fight again. You come from a traumatic marriage and you fall in love with this wonderful person. There's still kids, stepkids that don't love you, stepkids that are ready to bury your life, and you're like, I don't want to fight anymore. I thought you came with no fights. Have you been in a situation where you were fighting with everyone at work, not because you're not doing your work, but there is a mandate issued against you? You finally get another job, and then you find another giant, a Jebusite, Amalekite. You find, and you're like, Jesus, I thought there was going to be peace in this job. Do I have to fight again? I don't have energy for this. I don't. Can I stay at home? And sometimes your first child had some form of disability. You give birth to the second child, then they tell you that maybe this child is autistic. It's like, okay, I'm coming from, like, Lord, all I wanted is a child. Is it that difficult? Is it that difficult to get? It's because you're carrying the traumas of the past. The Lord is not going to stop to test you because you're carrying baggage. If you still carry balances brought forward, it is at your detriment. Learning doesn't stop. Testing doesn't stop. Okay? So Caleb says, and this is Caleb having a strong spirit naturally. Strong spirit naturally from God. And he says, listen guys, if we came out of Egypt, I don't mind that we have these giants that we're seeing, but listen, the Lord is going to bring us out of them. like He brought us out of Egypt. We're going to have victory. Don't overthink this thing. But the 11 spies that were not cancelled, even Caleb was not cancelled, but his spirit was naturally stronger. They're like, say what you want to say, but we're tired. And they're saying, listen, they're naming, they were there for 40 days. They're like, we found the Amalekites, we found the Hittites, we find all the ites you could think about in that space. And then there were the giants of Anak. You see, that was just a topper. That was just a topper that, oh my Lord. We saw the Nephilims. We saw the descendants of Anak in this place. Definitely. We're just not up for this. We're not up for this war. And because they had no identity, they had broken to no identity. Broken identity to no identity. The one says in verse 33, we felt small as grasshoppers. And that's how we must have looked to them. These are the people not cancelled from the traumas of Egypt. They are seeing their enemy bigger than them. And they're saying, listen, our very essence of us is destroyed. And we think these people can smell it. Have you ever been battered to a point, bruised and battered to a point where you feel like, I think my enemy is smelling my fear. They can smell it from a distance. They can smell it from a distance. And sometimes we stay in that small state and we don't emerge to, I'm big. Never mind the tests, the trials and the tribulations. I'm great, I'm big, I'm blessed. You know, when we transcend from our small state to what God has made us to be, which is the state of being big, bigger than what we think, you always have to run to Deuteronomy 28, where it says, I am blessed in the city and I am blessed in the country. And I always use my eyes when I'm taking possession of this. It says, the fruit of my womb is blessed, and the crops of my land is blessed. The young of my livestock is blessed. My basket and my kneaded trough is blessed. The enemies, my enemies that rise up against me, will be defeated before me. And they'll come from one direction, but they'll flee in 7 directions. We are bigger. Remember, we're bigger than what we think. We're bigger than what we think. I'm blessed coming in, and I'm blessed going. My barns are blessed. The Lord will grant the enemies that rise up against me to be defeated before me. They will come in one direction, they'll flee in 7. The Lord will open heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, and he will send rain to my land in season to bless all, not one, all the work of my hands. And I will lend to many nations, but borrow from none. I am the head, I am not the tail. We are bigger than what we think. Listen to this beauty from God. We're bigger than we think. We are bigger than we think. Listen to this beauty of Deuteronomy 28. It doesn't see you small as a grasshopper at all. So even when life compares you to a SIM card or to a memory card or to a grasshopper, girlfriend, boyfriend, rise up. Rise up. That's not your default state. It says, John 1 verse 12, yet to all whom did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave them the right to become the child of God. What bigger thing can you have on this earth than to be called a child of God. So you're not as small as you think. You are not small at all. You are bigger than you think. God is your Father. God is your family. God is your identity. They can shift you, they can do this, they can move you, but God is your identity. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Even the lessons and the tests we go through, they just work for us. They're bound to work for us because God is our Father. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sin in according to the riches of God's grace. Listen, you are bigger than you think. Your Father is rich in grace, a commodity that can never be sellable, but it is accessed by the children of God. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. So you are made in the image of your Father. You are made in the image of your Father. How dare you think small of yourself? Find counseling in the scriptures, okay? And when I'm closing, I'm going to close about a poem that was written by Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not? Who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. My Jesus, it is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people the permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates us. Father, we thank you for a word. I pray that it finds place in your children, and I pray that it heals your children from any fears, any doubts, and them feeling small. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.